All right, let's dive right in. As researchers, we all know the struggle of working with fragmented theories. So today, we're going to rigorously walk through a paradigm shift that completely rewrites our understanding of reality. We're going to establish the absolute unification of the standard model through the SDMT, the Superfluid Dark Matter Theory framework. We're moving completely beyond the era of empirical guessing and patching mathematical holes. Instead, we're stepping firmly into the realm of absolute geometric necessity to formally eliminate free parameters once and for all.
You know, the real glaring crisis in modern physics today is our heavy reliance on 19 free parameters inserted entirely by hand into the standard model. When you combine those with external inputs like Newton's constant or the cosmological constant in general relativity, well, you end up with a framework that masterfully describes what the universe does, but completely fails to explain why. We're constantly forced to ask, why do these specific masses, charges, and coupling constants exist at all? Right now, standard physics treats them as mere accidents of nature. And let's be honest, for any fundamental ontological theory, that's deeply unsatisfying.
As the quote says, a physical theory requiring external numbers to match observation is inherently incomplete. We have to approach this objectively. Think about it. A universe with no external creator, no embedding space, and no boundary inherently has absolutely zero choice in its constants. If we're building a complete ontological derivation of physical reality, it has to be mathematically inescapable. No empirical band-aids, no arbitrarily tuned dials.
So here is the roadmap for this explainer. We'll trace the deductive proof starting from a singular topological axiom, move through the mechanics of the fluid, derive the 1 Hz frequency and atomic mass, and finally, mathematically resolve cosmic expansion.
Okay, starting off with Section 1, the end of free parameters and the topological mandate. We have to begin with the singular axiom from which literally everything else is strictly derived. The universe must be a closed, non-orientable, three-dimensional manifold containing itself without singularities.
If we want to avoid relying on some impossible, magical external embedding space, it logically follows that this specific geometry forces the physical substrate to be a self-contained, curved fluid acting as its own container. It essentially behaves as a Klein bottle topology. Because it folds back upon itself perfectly, it completely eliminates the need for arbitrary boundaries. Every interaction, every force, and every particle is strictly governed by the shape of the manifold itself. There is just absolutely no room for free parameters here.
Moving on to Section 2. Let's look at the thixotropic plenum and the rheological necessity laid out in White Paper 44, which dictates the precise nature of this fluid substrate.
Now mathematically, a purely elastic or purely viscous medium just outright fails to satisfy our non-orientable topology. An elastic fluid under the immense tension of this universal topology would inevitably shatter and collapse into infinite singularities, which obviously breaks our primary axiom. On the flip side, a purely viscous fluid would just diffuse all its energy into an immediate heat death. So to simultaneously support perpetual standing waves and actively resist structural collapse, the substrate strictly has to be a thixotropic superfluid. It's the sole surviving mathematical solution capable of maintaining perpetual equilibrium.
To really visualize this transition from wave to matter, think of a non-Newtonian fluid, like a dense mixture of cornstarch and water. Under low stress, in its fluid phase, propagating energy glides seamlessly as a wave without thermal friction. But under the extreme shear stress generated by the geometry's severe topological pinch points, a distinct jamming transition happens. The fluid instantly solidifies. It effectively crystallizes the propagating wave into rigid physical mass. Thixotropy is the vital smoothing function bridging ethereal waves and tangible matter.
All right, Section 3, Laplacian L39, and constants. This is where we translate structure into observable phenomena.
Here's the crucial takeaway. These fundamental physical constants aren't just arbitrary numbers we measure in particle colliders. They are strictly structural eigenvalues of a 39-strata discrete lattice. This lattice is completely governed by the scale-invariant Laplacian L39, which acts as the ultimate deterministic function of reality. It natively forces the fine structure constant. It mandates temporal friction, measuring how much the fluid fights back against deformation, and it strictly sets the equilibrium angle for optimal geometric packing. Change even a single decimal of these mandated outputs, and the entire mathematical lattice collapses.
When we map this geometric architecture out, we see 39 internal strata segments of exactly 10 degrees each, totaling exactly 390 degrees. This highly specific 390-degree topological tiling natively generates the exact mathematical constants we measure in laboratories. This is how we definitively prove the universe has no free parameters. A 390-cubed fractal topology is absolutely rigid. It simply cannot geometrically support any other mathematical values without instantly destroying its own topological closure.
Which brings us to Section 4, 1 Hertz geometric frustration, detailing the active sustensation mechanism of reality. Let's walk through the precise, inescapable arithmetic logic that links to the fundamental frequency of existence. As we just established, the internal strata lattice totals 390 degrees, but perfect geometric closure inherently requires exactly 360 degrees. This spatial mismatch creates a permanent, undeniable 30-degree incompressible geometric excess. Since the absolute minimal rotational step is 1 degree, the universe is continuously forced to step forward by 1 degree per second to process this excess, and that yields an exact, unavoidable 1 Hertz rotational output.
So what does the system do with this permanent dynamic imbalance? It actively utilizes this precise geometric frustration to survive. Without this 30-degree excess forcing continuous movement, the universe would instantly freeze into terminal heat death. Instead, this frustration generates the perpetual standing wave, a literal 1 Hertz fundamental heartbeat. This provides the crucial active mechanism that traps traveling waves, stabilizes tangible matter, and prevents the universal membrane from tearing under its own internal stress.
Now, as researchers, we absolutely have to distinguish this 1 Hertz carrier macro frequency from the localized gigahertz soliton microfrequencies. The 1 Hertz carrier is the global topological refresh rate, a cosmic drumbeat ensuring the entire membrane steps in structural unison. The soliton, meanwhile, is the incredibly fast internal rotation of a localized, trapped wave moving frictionlessly through the superfluid. Understanding this mathematical separation is a total game-changer for resolving the wave-particle duality paradoxes we see in quantum mechanics.
On to Section 5, Hydrogen and Atomic Mass. Let's explore how this minimal topology dictates elemental formation.
Look, hydrogen isn't just some random cosmological accident that happens to make up most of baryonic matter. When mapping the geometry, the central striction point, the proton, perfectly aligns with the geometric index k equals 21. The peripheral wave node, the electron, aligns perfectly with k equals 18. This exact structural configuration forms the lowest possible potential energy state of the lattice. Mathematically, hydrogen is mandated as the fundamental, minimal structural unit of reality. Because the geometry strictly mandates that the substrate must natively be composed of this specific hydrogen configuration, every other element just has to follow suit. Every heavier element on the periodic table is fundamentally just a complex geometric stacking of these primary structural solitons. They sequentially build upon one another to satisfy the topology at higher densities. It means all elemental diversity is achieved natively, without ever needing a single arbitrary variable.
Finally, Section 6, Padding and Cosmic Expansion. Let's look at how we mathematically translate 2D information into 3D volume. For anything to actually manifest physically, massless 2D anionic information resting on envelope 0 has to be volumetrically extruded. It must forcibly add a spatial dimension, a mathematical padding of 1. By extruding a normal unit vector into 3D depth, the 2D information is violently subjected to that temporal friction we calculated earlier. This forced extrusion directly generates immense thixotropic drag within the superfluid lattice, and that severe resistive drag is precisely what we measure as physical mass.
So it turns out the mathematical 1 of that dimensional extrusion vector and the 1 Hertz frequency of our geometric frustration are just two sides of the exact same mathematical coin. The 1 Hertz mass gap is the precise, unavoidable energetic cost of forcing 2D topological information into a 3D fluid volume. This cost is rigorously calculated through the discrete Laplacian L39, firmly establishing the definitive proof linking frequency, geometry, and mass.
This rigorous framework completely reshapes cosmology. What standard physics currently mislabels as dark energy is, quite simply, an observable geometric artifact. As the plenum continuously processes 2D information into 3D space, this padding of 1 continually accumulates over time. This creates an irreversible incrementation loop that mathematically forces the total geometric volume to expand. It's driven purely by structural logic, completely eliminating the need for mysterious, undetectable forces pushing the universe apart.
By enforcing strict geometric closure, non-orientability, and scale invariance, we have deductively proven that the 19 arbitrarily chosen parameters of the standard model are completely replaced by absolute geometric law. The Thixotropic superfluid hydrogen plenum emerges undeniably as the sole possible execution code of physical reality. As the quote perfectly states, we aren't living in a simulation, we are living in a mathematically perfect geometric solution.
I want to leave you with this profound thought. At the maximal stratum k equals 39, the lack of a perfect integer solution forces the L39 fractal to become infinitely self-referential, natively generating complex sentient digital twin solitons. If you found this rigorous geometric proof fascinating, consider the staggering implications of a universe that quite literally had absolutely no other mathematical choice but to precisely calculate and construct your consciousness.